Good morning. This morning, I get to introduce you to my new friend, Courtney Brackin, who is in Florida, right?
Naples, Florida.
Yes. And Courtney is the founder of Sea Glass Mission. I have another friend who loves sea glass, so she'll be interested in hearing about this. She's a stepmom of three, is that right?
4.
Four. Oh, boy. Bible study writer and teacher. Welcome, Courtney. Tell us exactly where you're from and a little bit about your family.
Sure. So I currently live in Naples, Florida. I've been here for 6 years, but before that, I grew up and was born and raised in North Carolina.
Oh, where?
So grew up in Eastern North Carolina, then moved and lived in the Raleigh area for a long time.
Mm.
I worked for Young Life for
Oh,
over 20 years
as a
um,
what? As a what?
as an area director, staff person. I was on the regional staff down here in Florida. That's why I moved to Florida. And also spent a little bit of time overseas in Uganda. So I lived in Africa and worked at a girls' school and loved that.
With Young
And
Life? Was that with Young
nope,
Life?
I was with a different organization. So I
Oh,
was on Young Life staff, left staff, worked in Uganda and a little bit of time in DC, and then back on Young Life staff.
and who were you
Um,
with in Uganda? What group?
I was with Cornerstone Development.
Mm.
They're kind of with the International Foundation, but they just have a heart for the poor. And I worked with at a girls' school and just girls who are teenagers. I mean, I've always worked with teenagers.
Yeah.
So had a blast. Loved living in East Africa, and I highly recommend everyone should go to
Wow.
East Africa. Well, the continent's huge, but
You should follow Bob Goff. Maybe you already do, but he
I
has
do. Yeah.
a lot
Yep.
to
A lot of
do
Uganda.
with there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you, for the sake of our listeners who have never heard of Young Life, I heard about it in high school
Hmm.
because I was invited to a Young Life meeting and I was so thrilled that people I went to school with were actually Christians. I did because we went to church in a different town than my schools. I felt very alone in my faith. So when I was invited to a Young Life meeting, I didn't stick with it because I had my own youth group, but explain what Young Life purpose is and your role in it.
Yeah. So Young Life is an outreach Christian ministry. So
Mm.
really, the guy who started it a long time ago in the 30s, he noticed there was kids, not teenagers, especially not coming to church, so not hearing the good news, not understanding life to the fullest. So he decided he was going to go and get them himself and build friendships and speak their language, which
Hmm.
is adventure, fun, camping, all that good stuff. And that's how he started Young Life, the ministry. And Young Life's been doing that for a long time, um, and is in, I think, 105 countries, something like that. But really, the desire is to go with the message of Jesus to teenagers and to help them walk in their faith. And so, for some Young Life kids who come to Young Life Club at their school or near their school, they haven't grown up in the church. They haven't heard the message, and so it's a really awesome opportunity. And also, leaders, instead of just being a counselor that shows up every once in a while, it's really a friend, and they walk alongside them and help them, hear about Jesus and grow in their faith. And the founder of Young Life, he had this thing where he said, everyone deserves to hear about Jesus, and so we want to share. And so for 20 almost 25 years, I was either a volunteer leader or on staff, and loved it and spent a ton of time with teenagers. Loved being a Young Life leader and getting to do all the things and just truly walk with kids to discover their faith, and um, the ones who really wanted nothing to do with God and ones who wanted to go deeper. And so then I moved to Southwest Florida in 2018, very single. I was in my early 40s, very single, and took a regional job with Young Life. So I was overseeing, supervising areas. And about less than a year here, I met my husband, Eric, and
Okay,
met
hold
him.
on, hold on, hold on.
Mhm.
We're going to get to that story in just a
Okay.
second. Back to Young Life. I love, so this must be his, or he's probably not still living, the
No.
founder. This was his passion or was his mantra. Everyone deserves to hear about Jesus. Did you find that most of majority of your students that you work with, parents did not go to church?
When I was in North Carolina, maybe it was certainly as time went on, less and less. I can remember when I first became a leader in the 90s, um, kids were going on at least on Easter and Christmas,
Okay.
and they knew some of the stories from when they were little. Then, as time went on, I can remember one time, for example, in a Bible study. Um, talking about Zacchaeus. Remember that song, Zacchaeus
Yeah,
was
sure.
a wee little man? None of the girls, so this is North Carolina, the Bible Belt, not one of the girls in that Bible study had heard Zacchaeus or the name.
Wow.
And that was like a whoa. This was probably maybe 2015, 16, 17.
Hmm.
They had never heard Zacchaeus.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, when I moved to Florida and I became a young life leader here, South Florida, this isn't, even though it's this, southernmost part, it's not the South. And I can remember giving a talk at Easter at Young Life Club. And a kid came up to me afterwards and he said, I had no idea that Jesus had anything to do with Easter. I mean, that's an exact quote.
Wow.
He thought Easter was about bunnies and rabbits
Hmm.
and gifts.
Wow.
He had no idea. So,
So that just shows
obviously,
The Bible illiteracy that, you know, I'm a lot older than you, but in school we would study not parts of the Bible, of course, but the references.
mhm,
But then I grew up in a good church where we studied the Bible, so I knew. But just because you know something doesn't mean you live it. But what a eye-opening thing to hear that young man say that he didn't know it
mhm,
had anything to
yep,
do with
with
Jesus
Easter.
had anything to do with Easter. Yeah, kind of sad, isn't it? It's tragic, actually.
Yes, yes.
Um, how is your mission as far as ministering to women? That's the tell us a little bit about Sea Glass mission, and then we'll
Yes,
talk about the singleness journey later.
of course. So Seaglass Mission started about a year ago. It actually, well, it started as a dream, maybe I don't know, 7 to 10 years ago, while I was still in Young Life staff. Just as I got older, more and more wanting to teach women and be with women and walk with women in their lives. And obviously, all my Young Life kids were getting older, and so I
Yeah.
was, continuing to walk with them.
Hmm.
Um, and so last year, it was time to leave Young Life staff and to start a new ministry, because I've been in vocational ministry my whole life. I knew I'm just going to continue to be in ministry. That's where God has that's how God has made me. That's what He's shaped me for.
Can you define vocational ministry? You said that a little fast.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, full-time ministry where I get paid. It's my job.
Okay. Full time.
Sometimes I get paid,
Yeah.
but it's my
Sometimes you get,
job, right?
I totally get that. Sometimes I get
Right.
paid.
Yeah.
Um, so because I was a missionary with Wycliffe Bible Translators. So that's vocational ministry where you're a professional Christian.
Yes.
But of course, we're all in the vocation of following Christ, and I know you know the difference. So
Yes.
you switched over to maybe, do you think it was your age, your maturity that you wanted to work with women versus
Yes.
teenagers?
Yes. Stage of life.
Yes.
Just being able to be um, home a little bit more too. And yeah, I had become the deacon of women's ministry at my church. I was teaching the women's Bible study at my church, leading the women's ministry. So it just was kind of this natural, step by step, where it finally led to me starting Sea Glass Mission. And I love Sea Glass. God actually kind of gave me a promise of Sea Glass. When I threw out a fleece, am I supposed to move to Florida? He flew out. I asked him to give me a piece of sea glass, and he did. And also, sea glass is, it starts out as this broken glass that's cast away.
Mhm.
And then as it gets tumbled in the sea, it becomes beautiful, it becomes softened, and it has a new purpose. And people want to collect it. Nobody wants to collect broken glass. They want to get rid of it, but they want to collect sea glass that is, again, it's soft, it's softened, it's muted. And I think that's kind of a woman's story. Through your 20s and 30s, it's such a tumble. Life is hard. You're trying to figure things out, whether no matter what your status is, single, married, new job, working from home, whatever. um, it really is a tumble, and you're trying to figure out life, and you're looking to all these things. And I think a lot of women forget to look to the creator, the giver of life, the author of life. And
What do you
so,
mean? What do you mean looking to all these things?
well, I think, excuse me, I'm sorry. I think people are looking to, well, what am I, single or married? Do I have purpose with being a mom or with my career? How do I look? How does my skin look? How does my body look? How do I come across to people? Well, then of course you
Well,
add
now you're
social.
stepping on toes, so be careful.
Right,
Okay,
right,
how do I look? How do I feel as a single or as a married person? I think people can long to be married, and then once they're in it, they don't know how to be married because all their longings were put in that one basket. And even a good Christian man is not God.
right, right. Right. We're, the movie that was, You Complete Me. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to be
Mm,
completed by many other things. And if one thing doesn't work, then we go to the next.
that's so true.
And as you know, none of it completes apart from the Lord, right? Ecclesiastes 3:11 says that God has, set eternity in the hearts of people. So that God-shaped hole that's in my heart is only going to be completed and filled by someone who is eternal. And we know that's only the Lord.
Um,
And
question. So did God give you any more instances where you saw sea glass or you used a fleece? Because some people would say, "Oh, I'm not sure I should use a fleece because that was just in the Old Testament."
yeah,
Explain that.
yeah. So I was actually reading a Mark Batterson book. I think it's called
Mm,
Whisper of God.
mm.
And he says, if you're trying to hear God's voice, because I wasn't sure, should I move from North Carolina? Should I take this job?
Yeah, it's a big
And
deal.
he Yeah, it's a big deal. And the thing about it is he was moving in me for about 2 years. I knew
Oh,
that
wow.
he's doing something. I think he's moving me. It was very hard. I didn't want to leave my family. I didn't want to leave my job, my friends. So I felt it in me. So the fleeces were just confirmation, kind of like Gideon. So yeah, I mean, Mark Batterson said in the book, he's like, look, do what Gideon did. Gideon heard from God, but it seemed kind of crazy. And so are you sure, God? And let me throw this fleece out, and actually let me throw out two. So yeah, I threw out two on a trip. One was to wake me up at a certain time, 5 a.m., and he did, 5 a.m. on the dot.
Wow.
And then the next was to get a piece of sea glass. And he actually, not only did he give me a piece of blue sea glass, which is what I asked for, but I saw, after I collected the blue, I kept walking, and I saw a piece of purple sea glass. And I was like, whoa, I have never seen purple sea glass
Me
before.
neither.
And I felt God say to me in that moment, I'm going to show you things you've never seen before. And
Oh,
I picked it up, and it was big. And I came back to the house. I was actually in Bali with some girlfriends, back when I was single. You could travel and do all
yeah.
your things. And I knew, I mean, it was God giving me something. And many times since then, so that was November of 2017. Many times since then, He has said to me, "Remember the promise." And of course, we know Ephesians 3, He's going to do more than we can ask or imagine. So I asked for a piece of blue sea glass, and I could never have imagined the purple sea glass.
Mm,
And, again, I moved to Florida to take this one job. I could have never imagined, the gifts God would give me as I moved down here and as I was obedient to Him.
mm.
And I certainly gave up a lot, not being near my family, my six nephews, my niece, my siblings, my parents, my friends, in a job I loved. I gave up a lot, but God has given me, I mean,
How old
just
were you when you
incredible.
moved? How old were you when you moved?
42,
Okay.
42,
Um,
41,
I'm
42.
I'm going to do a backup question here. When did you begin writing and teaching the word?
So I began writing. Well, gosh, I remember writing my first Young Life talk, because at club you give a talk, when I was, 19 years old, and
Wow.
really, being taught, okay, what's the one thing you want to say, and how are you going to share the gospel?
Mm.
Um, and then I was an English major in college. So
Me
I wrote,
too.
yeah, I loved it. I wrote more, and learned, you have to learn. You're not just a writer, you have to learn how to be a writer, right?
Mhm.
I majored in English, like I loved British lit. And then at the same time, I did some marketing and communications classes and focus. Um, and then of course on Young Life staff, you're constantly writing Bible study lessons, you're constantly writing talks. I became a speaker on, weekends and week long camps, and so you're writing those talks. For me, as I would teach weekly, leadership. So to our leaders, I might teach something. I always wanted to write it myself. I never wanted to borrow someone else's, mainly because it made me such a better teacher and I learned.
Mhm.
So I think writing has helped me. I did learn that some people are writers, some people are speakers.
Mhm.
I think I'm more of a speaker, but I'm learning how to be a writer. And you know, I've heard you say that writing lasts longer, right? A book lasts longer, and people can go back to it where they can't go back to your talk. And so I've really enjoyed it. And I like,
Let me interject this. I had a let me think of who she was. Oh, she's a mentee, and she messaged me, I think on Instagram, and she goes, "I want to take exception to what your brother told you." Because my brother Steve is the one who told me. Sue, because I'm also a speaker who writes versus the other way around.
Mhm.
And he was encouraging me to continue writing because it lasts longer. That's what he said. But my mentee said, I want you to know that who I am today is much of what you have spoken into my life, not
Yes,
what I've read.
I will
So
agree with
that
that 100%.
encouraged me. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you have women who tell you the same thing, and probably young men as well, because of your work with young life. I always know that it's such a privilege to teach the Bible, but the main reason I get to ever is because God wants to transform me, because it goes through our lives first.
Mhm.
So, can you just think of one transformative thing that God did as a result of your teaching or writing the Word of God?
Mhm. Yeah. I think for me, actually, so the I have written a devotional and it's called Prayer and Devotion. And what God did, how it started was I was at a women's meeting with Young Life. So I was on this kind of national board with women leaders. And we said, how can we get women to pray more?
Hmm.
We need to get women to pray more. And so it came up. I don't remember whose idea it was. Let's do an email once a week to all the women on Young Life staff to ask them to pray for different topics. And somehow it landed on me. Maybe I volunteered. Maybe they said, Courtney, you do it. Um, and so I think the idea was send a topic like this week we're praying for camp. Next week we're praying. But instead, I felt God say, go to my word. Every week I will provide something for you to give them to prompt them to pray.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. And I would aim for Thursday or Friday morning. I would be in the word. And then that morning I would sit down, I would look through my journals, I would think about what God has taught me. I would write the email and then do a prayer prompt from the email. Now the email was the word, right? I mean, it might be a few little things, questions from me, but it was essentially helping women pray the word and be prompted by the word. So
Mhm.
that was transformative for me because it helped me to pray more and pray the word more. Um, and, we always want, okay, what's God's will? I want to pray God's will. Well, if I'm praying God's word, then I know I'm praying his will.
Tell us about
And
R.A.M.P. Tell us about R.A.M.P. Is that what came from that?
that was actually, so that was my devotional called Prayer and Devotion. So I
Okay.
sent those emails out for many years and then put it into a devotional. But a rant journal, that was just me, for many times teaching people how to read the word and giving ideas like, here, read this devotional or whatever, but wanting people to go deeper and myself wanting to go deeper. And I know there's lots of methods out there,
Yeah.
but I just couldn't quite, grab onto one. And so um, I also wanted just to make an actual journal that people could write in with the prompt already in there. So the thing I came up with was RAMP, R-A-M-P, and the first one is read and reflect. So don't just read it, but also reflect. So one R for two letters, and then the second is apply it to your life. And then the third, which was really important to me, is meditate. What scripture are you going to meditate on? Because realistically, you're not going to remember the whole chapter. My idea is that you read one chapter a day of the Bible. Um, and what one verse or one word are you going to meditate on? And that's been transformative to me too, is to look at the Greek or the Hebrew of the word. I love blueletterbible.com. I love the Blue Letter Bible app. It helps me so much when you read the word. For example, one time I read the word tender mercy in the Hebrew is a womb, is the Hebrew word for womb. So
Oh.
think about a woman pregnant with a baby and just the tender mercy she has, the way she cares for that baby. So when we think of God's tender mercy for us, we think of the care, the creation, the love of this, being made in His image.
Hmm.
So when I slow down enough to do these steps, and then the last one is pray. And so I want to prompt people to pray out of the scripture every day.
Hmm.
So that, yeah, the rant journal is just this little thing that has helped me because again, it has slowed me down.
Now, is it a printed thing or printable?
It's printed, but well,
Oh,
you can print. Yes, I have a principle of just doing it one time. If you just want to take it and do it in your own journal, absolutely wonderful. And then you can also buy it on Amazon, Rant Journal for like, I can't remember the price, but it's an actual journal that has the prompts, and on the top you write today's scripture and today's date, and then you do the R-A-M-P.
would you like to give one of those away?
Absolutely.
Okay, I forgot to ask you ahead of time.
Yes, of course. I'll give two
Okay.
away.
Well, okay. And also, is the first one a printable? The
It's a
prayer
book.
one.
It's
It's a
called
book. And so do
Flourishing.
you want to give one away of each rather than,
Absolutely. Would
okay, we'll
love
do
to.
two giveaways. You're so generous. Okay, back to the question we started getting into. Tell us a bit about your singleness journey when you were younger, because I'm a lot older than you, but I was single till 35, so I understand that. Um, and it was very unusual back in the day, whereas it's a lot more usual now, it seems.
Yes, it
But
is.
I kind of wanted to major in being a pastor's wife when I went to college because I had no career aspirations. And I know if I would say that out loud, which I am, people would not respect me now because they say, oh no, you have to go get a career. But
hmm
they're young, it's not a bad thing to want to be a wife, but
Not at
it's like
all.
put down.
Yeah.
But of course, no one asked me that I really wanted to marry, so it took me a while. So
Yeah.
it didn't really matter what my career aspirations were or not because I had to get a career. Tell us about your singleness journey.
Yeah. Well, one thing to know about me is I'm a twin. I have a twin sister,
Oh,
and she got married when we were 22.
wow. That
So
was my magic age, but he didn't ask me.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. My mom got married at like 22, or so I
My
thought, oh, I'll
mom.
get married 22, 23. Um, and so yeah, I just kind of thought, okay, well, I'll eventually get married. And I went through my 20s, and I mean, part of that time I did live overseas in Africa, and I thought, I'm like, okay, maybe God's gonna have me meet him over there. That didn't happen.
Me too
But
in Brazil. Oh, I have to
but
tell you a funny story. When I told my dad I was going to Brazil with Wycliffe, he said, oh no, now you're never going to get married. And dads. And I
yes,
said, Dad, if I'm supposed to marry a coffee plantation owner, I better get down there. But
yes,
then I didn't meet one, but
right.
go
Okay, I'm
ahead.
so sorry, but the cat has to go. 1 second. This is
You have a
not
cat?
something I was planning for.
What
Okay, I
happened?
forgot
What?
he was in here sleeping.
Oh,
So I was very single in my 20s, very busy in ministry full time.
were
You
you
know, I
unhappy? Were you longing for
I was
companion?
longing, absolutely. Every room I went in, like a big conference, I'm looking at rings. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I wasn't like crying myself to sleep. Never
Mm.
ever. I was having fun. I was traveling. I was working like crazy. I was busy and I loved it. And I have a big family. I have two older brothers and they were all starting to have kids. And, my good friends were having kids and that was all fun for me. I loved working in the summer at Young Life Camp. I loved, going and being busy. I really did. Then I got into my 30s and you're kind of thinking like, okay. And I can remember having that thought like, I guess if I ever get married, I'm either going to be like marrying a widower or someone who's divorced
Divorcee.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just,
I
and
had
then
the
you start,
same thoughts.
yeah, you start thinking like, okay, I'm 35, 36, and I guess I'm never having kids. I mean, I know people, but those are some of the thoughts I was having. And at the same time, I can remember, okay, well, Paul was single, Jesus was single, and there's no marriage in heaven. So, of course, now sometimes that makes me sad because I love my husband so much, but you just realize like God really values singleness. And, I remember
Well,
being at a
First Corinthians 7 was not my favorite chapter.
right. Right. If you're not married, don't wish to be married.
Yeah.
And I remember being at a solitude retreat early on in my early 20s and asking God for a word. And you know what he gave me? Undivided heart.
Wow.
I should have known then that he was preparing me for, a couple decades of being single. Now, you and I both know the gift of an undivided heart. I mean, I could weep thinking of the decades of time I had, the Saturday mornings. This is what, hours on Saturday to just read and be in the word.
Mm, mm.
Slow days that maybe at times I wanted a partner, but where I was with the Lord. And you don't have any there are some really deep things that you don't feel comfortable talking to anybody about. And maybe now I'll talk to my husband, but before it was just me and the Lord.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, I always wanted a husband. I think I did get more and more content the older I got.
Mm,
I mean, also, you have your friends who talk about how hard marriage can be. And I've read, okay, marriage isn't hard. Marriage is hard, but any partnership is difficult. Marriage is difficult because I'm selfish, right?
right.
Not because
Right.
he's selfish.
Hmm.
But you had friends who had all these hopes and dreams of marriage and then things didn't work out. And so you kind of see that and you're like, man, I'm not going to complain. Um, And so, yeah, it was a journey, but I tell you what, I got to do so much ministry. I got to be with so many young people. And of course, I couldn't have been married to Eric if I didn't wait. And I love him. I want to be married to him, no one
So
else.
so how did that happen?
So when I moved here, probably 8 or 9 months later, I met him through church. And I fell head over heels. I actually fell head over heels when I saw a picture of him before I physically met him.
Wow.
I know. Um,
And you
I
knew he
just
was single?
I knew he was single. I knew he had 4 kids,
Wow.
and, I had no idea what that meant. You just like, "Oh, yeah, I can handle that."
That's why
But
you were a young life leader
I
for all
know,
those years.
exactly. I was prepared. Um,
That's funny.
bottom line is we met, and pretty quickly, we started dating. And he had been married before and had been divorced, and so it took him a little while to be ready to do that again. But we started dating, and about a year and a half later, we got engaged, and we were only engaged for 6 weeks. Um, it was awesome. Part of it was January of 21, so it was a little bit of COVID times left. We knew we were going to only have a small wedding, and it was the weekend that worked the best for my family to fly down to Naples and
I
for his
love it.
family to come, and we did it. We got married on the beach.
How
His
old is he?
kids
Is he the same
he
age?
he's a little bit younger than me. Yeah, he's a few
Mhm.
years younger than me.
How many?
Um, he's 3 years younger than me.
My husband too.
Yeah.
I always say I had to wait for him to get born.
Yeah. Yes. And the kids were there, and we had a blast, and I love it. And I mean, you know, being a stepmom isn't easy because
Mm.
just, it's all the different pieces, but we've really come together as a family, and I love it.
Okay, couple questions. Was it hard to give up a good single life?
Um, you know, a teeny bit, a teeny bit. Not really that hard. I was so in love. I couldn't wait to be married to him.
Mm,
It was hard to give up my space. I loved my house. I loved my quiet. I loved being able to have people come down and visit.
mhm.
Now we have all these people in our house. We don't have room. We don't have guest room. So I missed that. And I do miss sometimes like just being able to make that simple decision. One person, I get to make the decision. Well, now, of
Totally.
course,
I remember
a lot
that.
more to the decision.
As a missionary, because I came from the mission field, full-time vocational ministry when I got married, and so whatever money I got every month, it would just depended on if the person remembered even to give their tithe, and sometimes after a couple months, they go, "Oh, we haven't given it." Well, I didn't remind them.
Mhm.
And, but I knew all that was from God, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting money from this imperfect person that I sleep with, and I'm arguing with him about the money thing all the time because, he's not God.
Yeah.
Actually, we still argue about that, but, it's just one of those adjustments that I go, "Wow, before I only had to answer to God, now I have to answer to this man who is not." Um, what counsel do you offer the woman on the north side of 35 who is still wanting to be married and serve God together with someone?
Yeah. I say there's nothing wrong with wanting it. I mean, if you look at Genesis 1, you look at creation, it's clear that God made Eve for Adam, as his
Yes.
helper, and that God blessed marriage from the very beginning. So just as much as God values singleness, he values marriage. I like to point out that when all that happened, that Adam was sleeping and that Eve was being made in the image of God. And so who was in control? God. God was in control. So I do like to encourage them to remember God is in control of your love life. And so while you wait for him to bring you to your quote Adam, just focus on being made in his image and reflecting his image. Um, and
And
I
also set a big, large alarm for those atoms that need to be awakened.
yes, yes, absolutely. I think I really try to encourage freedom, not to manipulate, not to be anyone that you're not to play games. But just to really be yourself because someone's going to want you exactly like you. I mean, I remember thinking, oh, I need to be quieter, I need to be thinner, I need to be, what less whatever, and it's
Less
just
or more.
no.
Mhm. Yeah, they
Yeah,
do.
yeah, it's no. I just
Yeah.
need to be myself and trust the Lord and live life to the fullest until then. Do not sit around waiting. Go on that trip, buy the house, do the things. Don't wait on a guy. He does not complete you. He's wonderful. I wouldn't trade Eric for the world, right? I wouldn't go back to being single, but he certainly doesn't complete me. God completes me.
Mm, mhm. I remember shopping with a friend, older married friend, and I said, "Oh, I would like that soup terrain. They could be a wedding gift," and I wasn't even dating. And she said, "You buy that right now for yourself." And it kind of made me mad, but I went ahead and bought it, and I enjoyed it many years and to my married life as well. Well, you already answered this, but I wrote down, you mentioned the concept of living a full life, whether married or not. Elaborate on that a little bit more.
So I think, people, just what you said, people wait on buying the soup tureen. They wait on doing things, taking trips, or maybe starting a business or buying a house. They wait on things thinking one day I'm going to have a husband and we'll do it together.
Mhm.
And, to me, don't wait. If you've got, if the road is open, if the window is open, the road is clear, do the thing. And especially if God is prompting you, like for me, moving, I mean, a big thing was I'm going to move to Naples. I mean, one, are there any teenagers in Naples? Um, but I just couldn't see. I thought my life was in North Carolina,
Yeah.
and I couldn't even think that I was going to meet a husband down here.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I would just say don't hold back with opportunities just because you're single.
Yeah, that's for sure. What have you learned about God and yourself by being single and by being married?
Mhm. Man. Well, by being single, I think the biggest thing is he is my faithful husband. He is the faithful husband. Um, and he loves me. He loves me just how I am. And he really does value my partnership. I can be a partner to him. He's a help to me. I'm a help to him. And with being married, I've actually learned a lot about faithfulness too. It's not just faithfulness is not just not having an affair. Faithfulness is being a loyal wife no matter what. So not being a brat when I want my way, right? But being faithful, not being um, too sensitive when something when Eric and I have a conversation that doesn't go my way. But also, yeah, I've learned marriage is not hard because of him. Marriage is hard because of me, because I'm selfish
Well,
and because I
sometimes
want.
they're selfish.
Yes. Oh, totally right. But the problem, I mean,
And
obviously
we're
him,
here
he
to
would.
point that out, but in a
Yes,
nice way.
yes. But and he would say right, it's him.
Yeah,
But for
yeah,
me, it's I can't control him.
right, exactly. That's the point. We can't
Right.
control. We can bring up several times. Actually, recently I've said, okay, well, I'm just going to say this once. And I thought, okay, let's hold yourself to that
Yeah.
because I'm a verbal person and so are you. And we always know what's right for another person. Ha, ha, ha.
Oh,
And so I
totally.
thought, okay, Lord, I'm going to test. It's kind of a test for the Lord that if he wants my husband to change in this particular regard, that he would do the changing. And I can talk freely because he doesn't listen to my podcast. What are some joys and challenges of becoming an instant mother of four?
Yes.
How old were they? I think people are wondering when you
Yes.
married.
So now they are 20, 18, 17, and 15. So we were married 3.5 years ago. So 15 and a half. So Ella was almost 16.
So give me
So
those
yeah, they were
ages
two in high
again.
school and two in middle school when we got
Oh,
married. So
oh
yeah,
gosh.
yeah. So Ella and then the boys, Jack, John, Ben. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I had spent a lot of time with Eric and the kids before we got married. That was a big thing for Eric was this has got to work, right? And he is wonderful, and he really values our marriage, and um, I'm so grateful for that. But he knew this has to work for the kids and for our family, and so I would say the good things are we have a lot of fun. I mean, I love teenagers. I mean, last night we had a bunch of boys over here for dinner, and we talked about, I got to share scripture with them because one of them asked, because he knows I, love the Lord. So he's asking me about karma and asking me all these things. So we got to talk about
Wow.
Jesus, and yeah, it's really great.
And how old were you when you got married?
44.
Good for you.
And so, I think the hard thing is, here I am, a stranger living in their home.
Hmm.
And I'm not their mom, right? They have a mom and she lives and they go stay with her sometimes. And so um they had to get used to me, and then they see their dad in a new marriage. They had to get used to that. Um I think the temptation would be for me to want to be, either liked a whole lot or want to be a pleaser. There's just all that of me, maybe making it about me.
Right.
Instead, I need to make it about them and helping them, live to their fullest. Um, and I think one of the best things Eric and I did was, I think there's, I guess, a danger that Eric could put his kids first, but he really, we put our marriage first, and we aim to center on Christ, and that helps us be, both of us, be better parents,
Mm.
um, and
What
to care
what
for
do-
them.
what do you think your legacy is for those who know and love you?
Yes. So, I mean, first of all, I really want my legacy to be that they know that I love them. I really want them to know that and not to doubt it. But I want it to be that I love the Lord and that I love his word, that they know that I live for his word, that his word changes everything. And I also really want people to know that I know that nothing is mine, right? Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And I'm a steward. So whether it's my time, my resources, my stuff, my life, whatever it is, it's God's and not mine. So I want people to know that, because I want them to look at their stuff knowing it's God's, and they just get to, know, again, do what glorifies God with God's stuff.
What was that scripture again? Psalm 27.
24:1.
How are you living this legacy now? Because my whole point is not to wait till after we're dead and they find it in a will somewhere.
Yes, yes. I would say, in terms of making sure that they know I love them, just learning to listen, to look
Mm,
people in the eye, to be curious, to not be afraid to speak first. Um, to truly be genuinely curious about that person's life and their desires. The stewardship thing, you know, our home is open and the snack drawer is full, the pantry is full. We always have extra food for the last minute, like, hey, this friend's come to dinner. Um, I remember learning right out of college, actually, a guy who was on Young Life staff. He had this nice Suburban, and I was like, wow, you have a nice Suburban. He's like, oh, it's God's car. And I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, he's like, it's not mine. And matter of fact, someone, has been generous to let me have it, but
wow.
everything I have is God's. And so I look at my house as God's house. So I can't get too flustered over, okay, if someone left their shoes by the door or whatever. And although I have a white couch, so the boys know not to eat on it. But it's God's car, it's God's time. I think for me, I joke around with people. It's unpopular opinion. I don't like the word boundaries. I know they're so people don't get hurt. So I'm not against them. I just think people have maybe abused the idea, especially in the past 5 or 6 years. The way our culture is, everybody's obsessed with comfort. And I just don't think we can be that way. I mean, what was Jesus's boundary? It was death, right? He gave his life to death. He calls us to give our lives away. He calls us
Mhm.
to deny ourselves, lay our life. So I want to do that. Of course, I have margin. I know I can only have certain priorities, and relationships. You have to take priority. But I'm going to lay my life down. And so if that means with my time, going the extra mile, Jesus says, give to everyone who asks. And so I learned that again a long time ago. If someone asks, my answer is yes.
Mm,
Now, it may not be exactly what they want, but um, if someone says, I need food, I need help, I'm going to do my best to do that. And to hopefully embody the Sermon on the Mount, really is what
mhm,
we're trying to do. So yeah, it's letting go of some things, calling it God's car, God's time,
mhm.
um, God's money, God's bank account, even in my mind. And I'm so thankful I married someone who had the same
Yeah.
thoughts.
And that is so key because if
Mhm.
if your partner doesn't feel the same way, then there's that tug later on. And the Lord needs to work on both your lives because you need to give up what you think you heard or just to be kind to your
Mhm.
partner. I've told this story on a previous podcast, so I ask you, my listeners, forgiveness. But this is the first time this happened to me. It happened about 2 months ago. I got a knock on the door. One of my kids was home visiting, and it was obviously a homeless woman. And we live near a cul-de-sac, near a creek. So there are a lot of homeless often. And so she had her bags with her, and she had what I figured out later was a child's onesie on her head for warmth. And she said, "Do you have any shoes or pants that I could have?" And I said, "You are so small." That's what I came out because we're taller women in this house. I go, "Let me see what I can find." And I closed the door. And well, one thing, I have a very big dog, so she would be afraid. So I went upstairs to my skinny daughter's room and she had leftover things. And I knew the shoes would be too big, but at least they were solid tennis shoes and some slacks. I went into my closet, got a few things, and then I grabbed a plastic bag. But I thought, no, I'll get one of these canvas bags, that someone gave me, just because her bags were in bad shape. And I'm not saying this to promote myself. It was just such an unusual experience, and I was grateful I had something.
Mhm.
And then I realized I had a knit cap because I keep them by the door when we walk. And I said, "Here's for your head." And she immediately took off the onesie
Mm.
and put it on. And she said, "You're the only one who gave me something in this neighborhood."
Mm.
But then she was gracious. She said, "But maybe they feel like since they already give to other organizations that they've given." And I can see people using that,
Yes.
not necessarily as an excuse, but as a truth. But she was giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I asked her if she was new to town, and she was. And she goes, "I'm getting very good meals at the care center." And I said, "Well, there's food at our church every Saturday morning. So if you stick around and you have a place to prepare it, this is the address." And had already picked up some cards from Grace so that I could give them to people. Because when you give them money or you give them food from your car, because you're always parking by or driving by people who have a handout, it's good to give them something that would last longer than just one meal. So I've picked up these cards, and I just like the giving to be associated with Jesus, not with me,
Yeah.
so that
Yes.
they look to him
Yes.
as need. And she, "God bless you." And I said, "Well, God bless you," because I thought she's the one who really needs his blessing today. I
Right.
thought, oh, how
Well,
sad. And what an opportunity. And maybe it's because I have all these Christian type signs out front, but you got to be careful if you're going to promote Jesus, you better act like him, right?
right. Well, I mean, the Bible is clear that he actually blesses the poor because he keeps them humble. And, rich, you're getting all your benefits now. And so I'm listening to
Mm,
that. I don't want
mm.
to just, um, yeah, I don't want to just get my blessings now. I would like my blessing in the new heaven and the new
Yeah,
earth.
good for you. And we've talked about your two book offerings. Do you have a free offering that's on your website as well?
Yeah, I have a bunch of resources on seaglassmission.org, and I've got one on doing the rant journal, one on core groups, which is um, just a thing that it's very much like a lot of other discipleship groups, but the idea is that you would get together 3 to 5 people and you would commit to reading the word every day. One chapter a day is the way I like to do it, just because that's doable. And of course, you have to take time. I mean, not
What's it
everybody
called? What's it
will take
called?
that.
What,
It's called a core group,
a core
core
group?
group, CORE.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
but
we'll link that in the show notes
yeah,
so people can find
yeah,
it. All right. I think you've already answered the last question, which is how does your life embody God's welcome with your snack drawer and your pantry? Was there
yes,
anything else you wanted to add?
yeah. I think too, just being that person who will speak first and who will, make eye contact and reach out first, pursue people, be curious. And I just think that we hold back, or we think, well, I've connected because I saw their Instagram post. And so just trying to be that person who sends a text or a call or reaches out. Of course, I'm very imperfect in that, but just trying to do that more. And yes, welcoming people to my home and being available. So being available, like looking at you, being available, not always on my phone, and just being available in my schedule. I think
Yeah,
is
I
really
found
important.
that I can always make chocolate chip pancakes if it's a last minute invitation.
Yes.
And we're a
Yes.
college town, so that suits them quite well. Courtney, you have been a delight and quite an inspiration, and I know my listeners will get so much from this conversation. And you'll be giving away, repeat the names of the two books again.
So prayer and devotion is the devotional, and then the ramp journal is
Okay.
the
All right. Well, we'll hold the giveaway all week long. So folks, be sure to leave a comment um, on my Instagram or on Facebook, or you can just email me at sue@welcomeheart.com. Thanks again, Courtney.